Good morning, everyone, and welcome to week 4 of facility design. So this week, as I mentioned before, will be no live class. So this will just be an online class this upcoming Wednesday. There is not a whole lot of expectation of you as far as what you need to do on that particular Wednesday. You should be working on your assignment. There will be a remote access hands-on lab open for you on that Wednesday, as well as the following Saturday and Sunday. So that assignment is due on Sunday before midnight. You can work on Wednesday and email me and send me some information, or you can work on the weekend, really whatever works best for you. Week 4 also is the first time that we're going to start talking about the back-of-house design in particular. So last week we talked a little bit about some of the universal design aspects, as well as customer flow, product flow, employee flow, and just how people and food move around these different operations. Now we're going to get into some of the actual back-of-house logistics, as well as equipment that can be used. We'll talk about a few things. There are 7 different factors that affect how we select food service equipment, so we'll look through that. We'll take a little bit of some of the commercial equipment that's already used. Now this is the main, probably 90% of kitchens use this stuff. There are some very unique and new or new tech that's emerging that has changed some of this kitchen equipment. We'll look at the basics right now, and then we'll get in, as the semester continues, we'll get into some of the new technology that's come up. We'll also look at some of the materials and the maintenance and replacing, and then some of the basic design concepts that we need to understand as we go through. So, what are these 7 factors that affect food service equipment? So the very first one is menu, and we have spoken about this in week 2 and reviewed it a little bit in week 3, is that menu is the first stop and the main tool to analyze what you need for your location. A menu analysis must be done, and it will also give you an idea of usage. Now the only thing is that we might not know is, while we understand what how many times a deep fryer, as an example, might be used in our particular menu. So let's say we have 6 of our 40 items require a deep fryer. Okay, that's fine. That gives us an idea of where to start. But it's also the menu mix. So the menu mix is a sales log, I guess you want to call it, of how many items are ordered and how often are they ordered. So although the 6 of the 40 items that require a deep fryer are used, so that's not a great percentage of the menu, those might be the most popular items, which in turn means that we need a lot more room. So we also look at menu mix, which is a popularity, as well as just the menu in its beginning essence, where we don't really know how many of each item will be ordered. And this can only really be dictated after we open up. So if we're already pre-open and we have that sales history, fantastic, we can use that. Otherwise, it's a little bit more of a guessing game. And the next one is the number and the type of patron. So who is our customer, and what kind of service are they going to be experiencing? So if it's a 500-person banquet or a 75-seat dining room, we may have the same processes, we may have the same equipment, but the size of the capacity will have to vary. So it all very much depends on what kind of level of seating that we're going to be having. Often we might have a 500-person banquet area that we rarely serve 500 people. Maybe we always do 100 or 200 seated dinners. But we need to understand that at one point we might have those 500 people. So how do we shift and how do we be flexible with what we have in our kitchen, that we can work with 75, and we don't need to use too many pieces of equipment, too many large pieces of equipment, and be unsustainable with a lot of our different utility usages. But should we have those extra numbers, those 500 people, can we be flexible enough to upgrade and get more pieces of equipment working? Also the forms of food purchased. So a very good example would be if you are a fine dining establishment versus a McDonald's. Processed food requires more freezer space. A lot of the stuff that you would go buy at a fast food or quick service restaurant, much of it's already processed, right? They're not buying potatoes and chopping them up. Rather, they're coming already perfectly seasoned in their fry form. in a bag that you just need to put into a freezer before use. Rather than a fine dining place, we'll need more fridge and dry storage space because we store the bag of potatoes in dry storage until it's time to use them. So very much dependent on the style of service. Is it a quick service restaurant, which is typically fast food, or is it a sit-down casual dining restaurant? Next one is the style of service, of course. So a self-service requires buffet setup with equipment to keep food hot and cold, whereas in a per-order restaurant or casual sit-down dining restaurant usually requires hot windows or cold holding tables back inside the kitchen. So it's not necessarily that they wouldn't use these equipment, it's more so where the location of these would be. And some of those hot windows or the things that we use in the back of house aren't necessarily customer safe. So while it might be similar equipment, they might look a little bit different. In-room dining, long-term care, resident dining inside their room will also require a lot of delivery carts as well as maybe some thermal boxes. So if you are in either a hotel setup or an in-room dining, long-term care, retirement home, those kind of dining establishments will require food that can be easily transported as well as easily kept warm or cold, versus a commercial restaurant where they sit at a table and food is brought to them. That requirement is not really there. And then the labor hours and workers' ability. So if the labor budget or labor market is limited, such as a remote location, then you purchase as much labor-saving equipment as possible. This happens a lot up north in Canada. We have a lot of remote camps. You can make a very good salary if you're willing to go work up there. But the expectation and things you need to know is that it's a remote location. It's hard to get food in. It's hard to get food in on a regular schedule. So much of the stuff that we do purchase is processed or frozen. And because there's only maybe a limited labor pool, you want equipment that's going to last you as long as possible and will also do as many of the steps in those processes as much as possible. It'll be more expensive up front in a capital cost mentality, but your labor budget will be reduced drastically. Managers must also weigh the cost of equipment versus employees. If we live here in Barrie or Toronto, there are a million people looking for jobs. It's a lot easier to find good labor. Therefore, they can hire more people and not worry about the cost of equipment nearly so much. And equipment costs also have a bunch of different things that go with them. And this could be the initial cost, which is the installation, but also the training that you have to go through with all of your employees, the cost of yearly maintenance. If you are borrowing money to purchase this, it could be some of the interest, rising wages, effect on productivity, limited hours. All of these things have a little bit of a weigh-in on what kind of food service equipment that you may purchase. Utilities is one as well. As a good example, where I live, we don't have natural gas. So we are all heated by propane, which is a little bit more expensive, and we have someone that has to come with a truck and fuel up our propane. Some people have a similar situation with oil. Oil is the only way to heat their property. So remote camps, remote locations, up in the wilderness, fishing and hunting and all of these different national park camps, they're often using propane, or they're often using even some wood burning or charcoal or oil-based heating. So specific equipment requires different types of fuel. Now, also, many of the types of equipment that we use requires a hood ventilation system. This is by far the most expensive piece of equipment, which doesn't cook. So it's about $2,500 a foot installed, and the prices of that have actually probably gone up. So when you think about a hood ventilation system, this is what it's over top of your cooking line. It takes all the fumes and the gas and the heat outside, and is a requirement by safety standards, and it is the most expensive, as I said. So a 10-foot range of hoods, it's not very big, and you can't get a lot of pieces of cooking equipment under, would cost you at least $25,000 to $30,000. This is it could be a barrier for a lot of restaurants to expand their kitchen. So ensuring that you have the right kind of hookups, the right kind of gas hookups, separate sewer and plumbing, good equipment that will work, as well as most equipment will give you an estimate of cost to operate or requirements of power. Even commercial, if you go into a Home Depot or a Rona or a Lowe's or something like that, and you walk by all the fridges and freezers and stoves, it'll tell you the expected cost per year to run this piece of equipment. Now, we don't really think about that often when we buy it maybe for our own homes, but as a restaurant, because you will be running them every single day for multiple hours a day, maybe 16 hours a day, that really should play a factor in what kind of pieces of equipment that you purchase. And the last one, of course, is budget. So it's always been budget at the very end that we look at it and say, we could build these beautiful kitchens, these beautiful dining rooms, this wonderful facility that will do everything that we wanted to do, but then the dollar signs come up and we say, and we can't because we don't have that much money. We need to make choices. And this will be the most difficult part. Many of you have already gotten some sort of diploma or degree, and this is a post-grad. So you're in management. And if you're not in management, your very first job outside of this, you'll be in management very shortly. And management, while they get paid more, have to make more difficult decisions. So you might be set up in a position where you're saying, I can afford one piece of equipment. My staff have acknowledged that there are 3 pieces of equipment that desperately need replacing. What do I choose? And you'd have to weigh your options, and you're not going to please all parties. So this is a difficult part of your future jobs. What is your budget? How do we raise money for this kind of stuff? And when we only have a certain amount to spend, where is that money best spent? So this here is just a list of some of the very common commercial cooking equipment. I'll go through a bunch of them a little bit more in detail, but you'll see many of these you might have in your home. Many of these you would only see in a restaurant, but I'll go through them in each a little bit more detail, starting with burners. So burners are usually used for cooking, boiling, or steaming. They're usually using a liquid petroleum gas, and now we have induction burners and hot plates that are available, which operate on electricity. So they can come open, they're mesh top, they're flat tops, something like these here. Now, these 3 that you're looking at here are not necessarily commercial kitchen grade. These are just little standalone units, and this is like a very common stove that you'd see at home. This one here might be a little bit more commercial level. But these are open flame, and again, as they're open flame, they must be under that hood vent system. A salamander or a broiler is something that we don't see as much as we used to. I remember when I was cooking in a kitchen, we used a salamander all the time. And I actually believe a salamander, when I say salamander, it's actually the brand name of what is a broiler, but it's like saying Kleenex is a tissue, but everyone just calls it, hey, do you have a Kleenex? The brand name has been so cemented in everyone's mind that everyone just calls it a salamander. So this salamander broiler is a standalone appliance, and it's usually meant for that last, like melting cheese on casseroles or over pastas. It could be for toasting garlic bread, doing that kind of last high heat. It's the high broiler equivalent on your stove. Ovens. So we use ovens for a lot of things in a kitchen. They're used for cooking and baking and roasting and browning, and they can be either on gas or electricity. You mostly need to keep these under the hood vent unless you are cooking something that is only used for baked goods. So if there's any proteins, any grease or oil that is being used in there, you must have it under a vent. Otherwise, you can cook, as an example, brownies, or you can cook cookies or some bread if it's outside of that hood area. But if it's anything that's potentially flammable, it must be under those hood vents. It usually contains a set of stacked racks, often placed beside each other in a tall stainless steel frame, and you can get really large stand-up open rack ovens. There's deck ovens, there's tunnel ovens. There are a bunch of different types, and here are some of the pictures that you might see. So there's our direct fire tunnel ovens, which are usually used for pizzas, as well as the electric tunnel oven, which will have this turntable moving around. There are your deck ovens, which help for a bunch of different cooking processes in the same area, or these large rack ovens, such as this one for baking bread, or the same process, but many of them. So depending on what your kitchen is required, you might look at these things and say a deck oven would be more useful because we don't need to cook 300 loaves of bread in one setting. Rather, what we need to do is 6 or 7 different processes, all at different temperatures. There are also griddles and flat tops, so they can be made of iron, stainless steel, or aluminum. Ideally, it's iron or stainless steel. Aluminum does not hold up over heat over a long period of time. So typically they're used for preparing breakfast sandwiches, omelets, scrambled eggs, patties. If it's the grill portion of it, you can be cooking steaks or other meats and chicken and salmon and all kinds of stuff. If it's a flat top, this is where you're seeing most of your breakfast items and your burgers and pancakes. The deep fryer, probably the most neglected piece of equipment in a kitchen, hands down. It is oily, it is dirty, they're often not filtered and cleaned nearly enough, but they are used so much in many of our different menus that we need to make sure that they're done properly. You may have seen there are a lot of different commercial brands for more domestic use. So some of the inversion fryers and the air fryers, which have a similar process, but you're just not directly submerging your food into the oil. It is healthier, but as we do have a lot of our deep fried fish and chicken wings and shrimp and onion rings and of course just our French fries, this is almost a standard in every commercial kitchen equipment, as well as when we have an issue where we need to make fast food or make good food fast and we're forgetting something, that we can use a deep fryer to cook it quickly. Not ideal. You'll have a bunch of different options of cooking ranges. So a cooking range is the most versatile equipment. It can operate either on gas or electricity, and it can have a lot of different processes in it. So what you would do, now the way that we can purchase commercial kitchen equipment, we can pick and choose what kind of processes we have and where they're set up. And many of these pieces can slide in and slide out of each other, and it's very flexible and adaptable. So here you can see this is a back-to-back cooking range where they have grills and flat tops and stove tops and deep fryer units, and it's just this wonderful process. Now, when you are setting this up, you should look for your menu and look at the different 2 or 3-step processes your foods may require. As an example, you might have to grill a salmon, but then you place it inside an oven, right? So you might flash it on a grill or in a pan. So you might pan sear it on both sides, lock in a lot of that flavor, but then place it in the oven, which is located directly below. That makes sense. Right here, you might see that there is what looks to be fridges. So fridges underneath your grill stations are fantastic. You can keep all of your proteins nice and cold, and then open your fridge. And these should be drawers, not doors, but pull out your food and be able to put it right on there. So it goes from fresh, refrigerated food right onto the heat, and that makes most sense. Same thing with a freezer unit, perhaps below a deep fryer, where you can keep your fries frozen or your onion rings or whatever, your jalapeno poppers, until they go into the deep fryer. So these cooking ranges really kind of meld together all of the different processes. And again, the idea is lowering the science of how many steps it takes to make these food items, right? When we lower the steps, we lower our costs, we lower the time, we increase our profit, and it's that simple. Kettles. So if any of you have worked in a kitchen before, kettles are used, but they're very rarely used ever during service. So these are usually a prep item. They are often in the back prep area, so they can be used for cooking or warming or storing food. They're generally a 2-layered pot, one inside the other with a gap for steam. So they're steam powered, which is typically electricity, but not always. And we also often use them for soups and gravies and sauces, where we might also make large batches of this kind of stuff and then have on the actual range or the cooking line a smaller portion kept hot. We might also have those hot tables or those hot holding or cold holding tables that we spoke about, where we keep these sauces either cold or hot for service, but have a larger batch in the back or in the refrigerator. So this is great. It's just rarely used during the actual cooking service. So often, again, in the back prep area, out of the way, as they are quite large and potentially the most dangerous piece here. This is probably the most dangerous, mixers. So, we always call them the Hobart, which is just, again, that brand name, like the Salamander or Kleenex or whatever. But there are two different types of mixers that are out there, the table and floor mounted ones. You can flat whip, you can wire whip, you can make all kinds of stuff depending on what you're looking for. So there's all kinds of different attachments. You can use these to shred lots of cheese, to ground meat. There's all kinds of different attachments on here that can help you. They are very useful, but again, they can be quite difficult to clean, difficult to maintain. They seem to break down often, and it handles heavy and bulky ingredients such as bread doughs at low speed. So you could do your dough arm, which is this one here. They're great to use. Usually you'll see these larger ones in larger commercial operations, and typically these, as well as your kettles, will never be seen in a quick service restaurant. These are only from using very raw food items, unprocessed food items, and going right to the finished product. And the dishwasher. So again, here's a little piece of advice. As future management in potentially a food service environment, even still, if you're not the chef, you might be a general manager of a long-term care retirement home or something along those lines, or an event and banquet center. Treat your dishwasher better than you treat anyone else. It is a difficult position. It's difficult to hire for. And really, if the dishwasher area is not being maintained, is not being kept up to speed, everything else slows down. And it's a horrible thing when you're waiting on dishes in order to serve food versus you're waiting on the food to cook, or you're waiting on, hey, we didn't get a certain item in. When it comes to dishes, which are easily just washed and put back into the cycle, you shouldn't be waiting on this. But this is where kitchens slow down more than anywhere else, which is hard to believe. So often we have automatic machines that needs human interaction for loading and then unloading. We rarely, in most kitchens, have the 3-sink process, although we will go over that in the future. So there's two different basic types of dishwashers. The door type, which is right here, where you put it in and you close the door and it'll clean whatever dishes are in there, as well as the larger units like this, which is usually on a conveyor belt, and it works very well. So these conveyor belt systems, you load up and they just go through, and they're usually on sensors, so if there's no rack in there, they will not be running. They do your cleaning, your rinsing, and sanitizing all within this same unit. And it's very, very fast and efficient. When I worked at Casino-Rama, our dishwasher was a 2-tiered, probably 30 feet or longer. Like you could probably fit 15 to 20 racks inside it. And it was well over $100,000. So other than the hood vents, this might be your most expensive single use. Most people have a double, which means it fits 2 racks in there on a conveyor system. But other than that, there's these single ones. This is usually something you'd see up maybe in a bar area where it's just a glass dishwasher, and this might be in the back of the house where all of your plates and everything else go through. As we talked about our exhaust hoods, so the exhaust hoods are used over cooking equipment to remove the exhaust from gas equipment or even steam. If you have gas equipment underneath the hood or are doing any frying, you'll be required to have fire suppression with the hood. So also why this is so expensive is because you need the fire suppression system on sensors, and we don't use water. It's a certain chemical that will ensure that you are able to extinguish any of the fire that might happen. It's typically an oil-based fire. Now, when this does happen, it's also a full reset. So you have a day or two of cleaning the whole kitchen. You typically need to throw out all the food in the kitchen. and then the professionals need to come in and refuel or resupply the suppression system. It's a bad thing to happen. So ensuring that these things don't go off unless they really need to is very important. And then we talk about some of the materials. So copper has a high upkeep and can react to foods, and it looks really pretty. So we use copper because it looks nice, not necessarily because it is the right material to use. Stainless steel is the most widely used as it does not stain, it doesn't corrode, react to food, it's attractive, and it's not overly priced. Aluminum is cheap. It really absorbs heat quickly, but it does break down rather quickly as well. And then cast iron is heavy, durable, and used for stands, supports, and large pieces of equipment. Some people will say that a big cast iron pot is their favorite piece. Personally, I would rather go stainless steel. It does have a bit of a traditional, homey feel to it as well, which some people like. And you might even see this kind of roll into some of the service standards where their food will come out in a smaller cast iron pot. And people like the feel of that as well. Again, when we start talking about front of house and materials, things that seem to be quality and have weight and durability to it often mean that you can charge a higher price because people feel there's more value. So if I had like a little baby lasagna or pasta or cappelletti or shepherd's pie that came out in their own individual little cast iron pots, people would probably absolutely love that. And then, of course, maintenance. So we often talk about maintenance when it comes to kitchens, where if it's not easy to clean or easy to maintain, it will not be maintained. And it's somewhat true. So when you purchase equipment, ensure that, yes, I know you can get an older unit that's used for half the price, but what's going to happen to your service if you do so? It is often... you pay for what you get, and it's often the best practice to pay for good quality equipment that will stand the test of time, that is easy to maintain, that comes with like cleaning and maintenance instructions, and maybe that is backed by some sort of warranty, than it is to try to save a few dollars and buy some stuff that's really not quality. So some of the best practices are ensuring there are cleaning procedures for equipment after every use. And these should be all laminated and put in safe areas, and typically checklisting is the way to go to ensure all of your employees are cleaning it the way it should be. There should be a consistent maintenance schedule. So if it's monthly or weekly, they have specific cleaners and equipment recommended by the manufacturer. Again, there might be cheaper options, but those might degrade or deteriorate your equipment. And then also make a log of any maintenance work done on a piece of equipment. So this is an example maintenance log where basically it just says the dates, the maintenance description, who performed it, the date of validation, the next maintenance plan, and any of your comments that might have happened. And then, of course, you're just, what is the piece of equipment, who's responsible, label, serial number, manufacturer, all that kind of stuff. Now, the reason that we want to do this is because if it is on a warranty, we want to make sure that we are maintaining it so maybe our warranty will not be void, as well as saying, hey, we've seen that we have not maintained this for 6 months and it broke down. Who is that person responsible for this equipment? So it's putting accountability on your staff, on your chefs, to ensure that I spent $30,000 on a pizza oven. I need to make sure that this piece of equipment is maintained the way it should. As far as the way that we want to purchase equipment, there's a fair amount of background research and due diligence that you must do. So these are some of the best practices. So you want to research equipment companies to ensure the firm is reputable and look for reviews. Reviews is a great way. There might be 1 or 2 bad reviews, but there always is. But ensure that it has a fairly consistent review platform, that it has some age and length behind it. It's not one that's just opened up. You want to look at several different models and several different types of equipment that will fit the food service operation, and then also ask for quotes to ensure you are asking for the right piece of equipment. So there might be similar looking pieces of equipment that have very different specifications. And a very basic one could even be, this one's for gas hookup and this one's electricity. And electricity would be potentially a lot more costly. So we're going to look at the methods of purchase, and these are all of the items that we typically will have. So there is an item number as an example, which are listed right here, and usually there are 4 or 5 different series that you can buy. The name of the item, the dimensions. Now this is very, very important because you have created a facility, you have created a back of house commercial kitchen, and if this thing is 2 inches shorter than all of your other pieces of equipment and it's unable to be lifted, you might cause a big issue where things often fall in there. If it's a little bit longer, so it juts out, you might cause a traffic issue. So all of your equipment's 30 inches deep, and all of a sudden this one's 36. So you have a 6-inch kind of area that people are always going to snag and bump and injure themselves on. The materials and the cost and when it could be delivered, if there's any kind of warranty, and again, what kind of fuel type is required. So this one here is just an example of Black Diamond gas deep fryers. They've shown you a couple items here. They'll break down all of the model numbers as well as the basic information that you might want. And things like a deep fryer will have more information that you want to know, such as oil capacity. So if I'm buying a deep fryer that has up to 23 liters versus one that has up to 37 liters, this also changes how I have to purchase my oil for my deep fryer. So there's a lot of different moving parts with this kind of stuff. And then finally, you will have to make a choice. So what you should do is have yourself a breakdown of all of the different costs that come with and some of the estimations that you can come up with. So here we have 3 different models for a stove. I'm not going to give you what the answer is, but what I want you to do is when you see this PowerPoint, I want you to go through this and make a decision on which model you think that you would need using this concept of relevant cost. So there's a cash cost and an estimated life. There's a trade-in value at the end, so how much money do I think I'll get at the end of it? And the cash from the sale of the old machine. There's installation of the new machine, initial training, annual maintenance contracts, annual cost of supplies, and the annual wage cost of employees, which actually doesn't change. So that one's not really an issue. But go through all of this and make a decision what you think would be best based on all of these models. And finally, as we talked about last week, the design principles is flexibility and modularity. So flexible to accommodate different menu items and methods of preparation, new equipment items, and new methods of service. When we talk about modularity, is that most people have standard sizes of equipment. Like a table height is generally 30 inches high, or a work surface in a kitchen is generally 30 inches high. When we go outside of these standard sizes, the costs go up because they don't make as many of them, and this is bulk purchasing. So because they make more 30-inch height ones, because they make a lot of Ford F-150s, every time you pick the standard size and the standard custom design, the prices go down. When you go outside of those standards, that's when prices really go up. So if you are on a budget, which typically we always are, you want to see, you make sure you can get the standard sizes. Also, when it comes to changing a piece of equipment out, you know that because it's a standard size, you can easily find a replacement, remove one old deep fryer and put in a brand new one, and you don't need to rearrange the rest of the kitchen. And that is a very costly, potentially costly, and sometimes not even doable alternative way of buying equipment, but you might need to rearrange and buy more pieces to ensure they all fit. So that is the end of this portion of back of house equipment. We looked at a lot of different pieces of equipment, some of the best practices on how we purchase them and what would make fit, and also the 7 different ways to kind of choose what pieces of equipment you may require. Next week, I'll have another lesson that we go into the kitchen, the dish, receiving, storage, and staff areas, as well as waste disposal and recycling. This takes up a vast majority of the entire building, so we'll go and look through all of this, and that'll be next week's live class, so not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. Other than that, I hope you guys all have a great week, and email me this Wednesday or whenever you like if you have any questions about the assignment or the course in general. Thanks.